I find it very presumptuous of any human being, including myself, any of us, to appear on Earth and to live a short lifetime, and in that lifetime to presume that our opinions about anything should hold any weight, and that we should live out of opinions which are acculturated. They're really somebody else's opinions that we have taken on. They're not even our own true thoughts about things. Do you see? They're prejudices.
Yes.
And so our society and our societies have been living out of arrogant people's opinions, or people's arrogant opinions about themselves, about others, about the way things should be in their societies, in their families, in their friendships, in their relationships. It's like, well, we have made a terrible mess by living out of our prejudicial opinions. And we must go deeper, we must go wider, and we must go higher than that if we are to match the evolutionary process that is sweeping us along, do you see?
I'm under the impression from your writings that your work is grounded in what people sometimes call the perennial tradition,
yes,
the primordial tradition, that is the spiritual wisdom that seems to come from the great mystics and teachers of all cultures and in almost all ages. That there is, when you talk about principle with a capital P, you're referring to something along those lines.
Yes. And back, bridging back to what you were talking about earlier, in your question, you were saying, well, so many different religions or groups or whatever have very strong opinions about what the law is, what the basic teachings are, and I feel that we all that these years we really must be able at least to see that we've got to stop arguing about who's right and who's wrong. And I guess a very important part of the work that I have brought forth as a call to greatness teachings, the teachings of A Course in Congruence, is that the ego, which is a stage-specific phase of our evolutionary process, the ego holds itself separate and right. And when we move beyond that stage of evolution, when we transcend it in truth, we realize that there is no right, or that it's all right, and that what we must do is make the highest choice, given that everything is right.
You mentioned the
and
ego.
That's getting too abstract.
Well, we'll come around again.
All right.
It is abstract, but sometimes these abstract truths are quite profound.
Yes.
And while they may be difficult to grasp, I think if we try and approach it from a few different angles, we'll be able to illuminate the question.
All
and
right.
so what I'd like to go back to is the word you use, the ego. We banter it around so easily in our conversation. I think it possibly means different things to different people, and I suspect you're using it in a very particular way that I'd like you to amplify.
All right. Well, I feel, because I was a seeker of understanding, at least, trying to figure my life out when I was a young woman and growing up and a middle-aged woman, I did a lot of reading and taking courses and trying to figure it all out, how to do it. And what I realized that in the last 30 years, a lot of information about the ego has been given to our Western culture, to our Western society. But there's a lot of confusion about what that ego is.
Yes, there's a whole branch of psychology called ego psychology.
Really? I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Part of psychoanalysis generally.
All right. So anyway, even having read so much about the ego myself, having spoken to a lot of people who talked about the ego this way and that, I in a very inspired moment, was given a picture of what the ego is, and a very simple explanation of it as a mechanism, as a psychological mechanism that is a vital part of our humanity. And that's what so I have drawn that, and I have taught that very simple model of the ego to many people over the last 9 years. And very basically, the ego is it's our past. It's an accumulation of experiences that we have had and conclusions we have drawn based on those experiences. But it's also it's the kind of mechanism it is, that the function that it is psychologically causes us to feel separate as an egoic being. And it causes us to reflect very clearly into the past and have a very difficult time seeing what's going on right here in the present moment.
So if I were to paraphrase you, I might say that you're defining the ego as the part of ourselves that we typically identify with based on our life history.
Yes.
And you're suggesting that we limit ourselves when we do that.
Well, the ego is the limitation. It's very difficult to even talk about this because we have identified ourselves, and it's like we actually have no identity, you know, except the ego. It's like the ego is our identity, and yet it is not us. It's not who we are. But we have been made to believe that's who we are. We are so much more than that.
And our self-expression, the way you speak of self-expression, is so much more than that.
Yes. And of course, the way I speak about self-expression is with a capital S. There is the lower self, which is the ordinary personality, the lower mind, the ego self, which is a very important. In fact, we couldn't be here. We couldn't experience life in this realm, in the third dimension, without our wonderful ego function.
Self with a small s.
With a small s. But the ego is only to allow us to be here and to transcend, to become transcendent to that littleness and to become the greatness that we really are here in our human life.